Hello, everybody. Welcome to join me in this session about Azure Lighthouse. I'm going to share with you all you need to know how you can benefit from this new approach to more efficiently manage your customers across multiple tenants. So who am I talking? My name is Jing Liu, and I'm a cloud solution architect based in a partner organization in Microsoft Sweden. And my area is on the Azure infrastructure side as well as security. Without further ado, let's kick off today's session. This is the agenda. I'm going to start by stating some of the typical challenges that we see the partners are facing when it comes to the model of managing their customers. With that said, I will introduce what Azure Lighthouse is all about and what are the value you can get out of it that efficiently address those challenges that were mentioned in the previous step. And then after that, I will share with you some more possibilities and scenarios that were not possible before, but are unlocked using Lighthouse. Then moving on to the more technical bits, I'm going to share some of the best practices to enhance your management and your security experiences using Lighthouse. And then in the end, I will also share with you some of the latest updates that the Lighthouse product group announces, some new integration we are building with the other features that are already available on the platform. And then in the end, I will also share a short Q&A and answering some of the most common questions I'm getting from partners. And of course, I will also show you demo of the tools throughout the entire session when the occasion is right to show you how the tool actually works on the platform itself. So I hope this sounds like an interesting agenda to you. And let's start with this overall picture. First, we have the customer. I'm pretty sure you have all been involved in customer conversations, hearing that they indeed have a strong desire to go through a technical transformation journey, but they simply don't know how. They don't have the right IT skill sets to know what are the latest innovations in the cloud that they can leverage upon. And it is also very difficult for them to keep pace with the change, whilst they are still trying to deliver on their core competencies. To add more complexity, we have factors such as the different compliance requirements that the customer definitely should be aware of. They would like to reduce their security attack surface, and sometimes there are also some other infrastructure related challenges, such as the decision of native cloud versus a hybrid setup. So with that said, that's why we have you guys come into the picture. We have a fantastic Microsoft partner networks that are providing your expertise to the customers to hold their hands and guide them through these different steps and make sure that they're achieving their goal in the end. However, when we talk to the partners, we are hearing another set of challenges. Some of the typical pain points including the varied tool sets that they have to use to onboard their customers for various products, and this process is looking very inconsistent. So sometimes they might have to maintain different credentials belonging to the customer tenant, as one example. And as a result, this also leads to very inconsistent governance mechanism across Azure and the other environments, which is adding unnecessary management overhead to your existing process. That's why we are hearing user voices from the partners that we are looking forward to having a unified and comprehensive management solution that can make it more efficient for them to do automation, as well as the first step, the credential management. After we have set the scene, I'm going to mention some of the more detailed challenges that we are hearing from the partners, especially the MSPs, the managed service providers, that they are facing in their day-to-day work. First one is the complicated and the inconsistent identity management solution that they are stumbling upon. The first step after you have onboarded a customer and start providing a service is to really making sure that you have the right identity created associated with the correct right. There are different ways to do it, and one of the typical way is what we call the B2B invite. So basically, your current credential will be used and created as a guest user in the customer's environment. One of the biggest drawback with B2B invite is that there is a lack of group support, meaning that the customer really needs to onboard every individual one by one and also maintain the life cycle around it, meaning that if a person leaves the project, that person's credential need to be removed. And what if there's a new person, a new consultant, for example, joining in? That complexity is not possible to bypass. And I know that there's another really common way is to create directly a credential in the customer's environment for you. Let's say if the customer is Contoso Hotel, you will get a new username and password at contoso.com, for example. And with that, you need to maintain different sets of passwords and credentials in order to manage the different customers. And under the CSP model, we have another concept called admin agent. I'm going to talk more about it in the next coming slides. But basically, all of these different approaches, they have something in common. They involve a creation of a foreign principal, and you as a partner will then have to maintain the different credentials. And there's no out-of-the-box solution to go around that. And the next challenge we're seeing is the lack of cross-tenant visibility. It is fine if you're only managing, let's say, 2 or 3 customers, but what if that number goes up to 10, to 50, and maybe even more? How can you make sure that there's a place for you to do central monitoring of all your customers? Since there's no out-of-the-box support, we know that some partners, they're either building their own dashboards to have that cross-tenant visibility, or maybe they have to purchase some third-party tooling to support that. And it is both expensive and also complicated to use. A third point regarding the challenges is the problem to scale. Maybe you as a partner, you have developed some really nice automation script and you would like to apply that to all your customers. Before Lighthouse, you can only do it one by one, meaning that you really need to repeat this work across and then replicate that across all the different customers. And this is very time consuming. And last but not least, we know that licensing issue can be complicated to resolve. So maybe some of these approaches, they work only for a certain types of licenses, but not the others. And then you have to do exceptions. And we know that exceptions always means complexity as well. In the beginning, I mentioned we have a concept called admin agent under the CSP model. So basically, this role is created in order for the partner to have access to the customer's resources to do the service management that is intended to do. But the biggest problem with admin agent is that it's an all or nothing approach, meaning that it's not possible to say, I only want to have visibility for this particular resource group, for example. If you activate that, that person will get owner permission on all the different subscriptions on all the different customers as well via what we call the admin on behalf of rights. And definitely it's understandable that some customers, they can't accept that. So how can we get that granularity? With all those points in mind, now I can finally formally introduce to you our very own Azure Lighthouse, what it is all about, and how can we use it to address those challenges that were mentioned previously. So Azure Lighthouse, in a nutshell, this is our most comprehensive and robust management tooling that can empower you to build and deliver managed services for your customers with higher automation and efficiency. Here in this slide, you can see some of the top value propositions we have for Lighthouse. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into each one of them and show you what they mean. The first point I want to call out is the automated management at scale capability. So basically, using Lighthouse, we are changing fundamentally how you as a partner can interact with the resources in the customer's environments. Rather than having to have your own credentials and log into the customer's environments, you will now actually have the resources projected back to your own tenant, meaning that you just need to stay logged in one place, which is your own environment. And from there, you'll be able to manage the different customer resources across multiple tenants. I'm gonna talk more about this later on, and this will get more obvious in the demo. And the second point, doesn't matter how you are interacting with the Azure control plane today. Maybe you are using the portal, or maybe you are using PowerShell, CLI, or some other scripting options. Lighthouse is completely transparent to that, meaning that you get to keep exactly the same way how you're working before. And lastly, we are also adding enhanced capability to do automation across multiple tenants. We'll also come back to this point later on. And the second advantage you will get is the greater visibility and enhanced security for your customers. This point, I would say, is really a win-win for both the customers and the partners. From the customer side, they have the confidence that they can now provide to you the granular access to the customer's environments, meaning that you don't always have owner permission to everything, but you can really specify, I want a particular RBAC role on this particular scope. And then as a next step, they can also see very transparently what are the activities that you've been performing on their environment. And then from your side, you also get to protect your intellectual property. This means that if you have developed some script and you are applying that to the customer's environment, if for some reason the customer is about to break the relationship with you, you get to keep that property without exposing that and leaving that together with the customer's resources. And now moving on to the last point, with Lighthouse, you also have now new ways to grow your markets. There are two ways to publish an offer using Lighthouse. One way is to use the marketplace, which in this way you get to have a higher customer reach, or you can also just use the ARM template approach. And another point is important one. Lighthouse is completely license type agnostic, meaning that doesn't matter if the customer is running pay-as-you-go, if they're running EA or CSP, you get to manage them in exactly the same unified way. And lastly, Lighthouse has been already integrated with many of the platform toolings we have, such as monitoring, backup, security center, and I will get back to those and show you more in the demo later on. And then very last point I want to call out is not written here, but it's a very important one. Many people ask directly, what's the price of Lighthouse if it sounds so great? Actually, Lighthouse is a completely free tooling, meaning that as a partner, you get to start exploring and utilizing all these fantastic capabilities without having to pay anything. Now you might wonder, what is the secret sauce in the recipe that really makes all this happen? Well, if you look at this slide, the new way of working is what we call the Azure Dedicated Resource Management. And the flow basically goes as the following. After you have already onboarded the customer using Lighthouse, whenever you initiate an action, let's say if you want to create a virtual machine on customer A, once that request comes into the ARM layer, the Azure Resource Manager, it will try to verify where the request comes from and where is the destination of the request. And in this case, it will see that, the request is issued by you, a partner, but the destination is actually another tenant at customer A. In that case, ARM layer will forward this request to the Azure Dedicated Resource Manager. And in the third step, it will also check that if you do have the right permission to trigger that request. And then if everything looks well, the request will go through, meaning that now there's a virtual machine being created successfully at customer A. So this is basically how it works under the hood. And I really like this slide. I think it illustrates really well what we mean by the new way of resource projection rather than having to have direct access to the resources. You probably recognize this diagram. Before, if you as a partner who is managing multiple customers, if you need to do an action, let's say to perform a backup for the different customers, what you need to do is to do this context switching. You need to basically log in to the customer A, do your work, log out again, and then log into another customer tenant, do some work, log out again. So you have to do this log in, log out multiple times, depending on how much customers you have. If you have a large scope of customers, this can be really time consuming and it is not scalable. But with Lighthouse, once you have onboarded those customers successfully, you will see that those resources will be projected back to your own tenant and your subscriptions, meaning that all you need to do is to stay in this one single place and you'll be able to perform all those activities without having to go into the actual context of each customer. And now you have an overview of what Azure Lighthouse is. I'm going to talk a little bit more of the new possibilities and scenarios that you can now unlock using Azure Lighthouse. Again, we are approaching this by the three main value proposition pillars. First one, automate and scale cloud management. As a service provider, now you'll be able to manage multiple customers with single sign-on, eliminate context switching between the different accounts. And this is exactly what was illustrated in the previous slide. You no longer need to do the login, log out to the different customers to perform your tasks, but all you need to do is stay in your own tenant and your own subscription, and you'll be able to perform all the different tasks in one single control plane. And then depending on what services you're doing, maybe you are doing monitoring for the different resources, you can then do your work using one single control plane. Maybe you are using Azure policies to really make sure that the customers, they are compliant to certain regulatories. And similarly, Azure policy is now fully integrated with Azure Lighthouse. And then lastly, let's say if you have developed some automation script that you would like to apply to the customer's environment, you also can now skip this context switching, but staying in one tenant, your own, you'll be able to apply those to multiple customer environments in one go. And now moving to the second pillar, enable your customers with greater visibility and security. Back to the monitoring scenario, you'll be able to monitor alerts, perform security audits, and so on across various customers. This integration is built in directly in the tooling itself. Later, I will show in the demo how you can monitor the secure score in Azure Security Center across multiple customers. Log analytics is the baseline for many platform services, such as Azure Security Center, Azure Monitor, Azure Sentinel, just to name a few. Log analytics is also fully supported across multiple tenants. And then the next one, you will now have granular access to a customer's environment. It's no longer owner access to everything, but you can actually have, let's say, reader access to a certain resource scope, and then you will have contributor access to another scope. And then lastly, the customers, they will also see clearly what are the activities you have been performing on the environments. Everything is being audited in the activity log. And now the last one, as a service provider, you can now manage your customers consistently regardless what licensing models they are using. They are running EA, CSP, pay-as-you-go, doesn't matter because Lighthouse can rule them all in one single way. And there are two ways that you can publish your managed service offers. You can either using a marketplace. If that option is chosen, you can also choose if you want to do a public offer that anybody can just look you up and start establishing a business relationship with you, or you can tailor make a specific offer for one single customer by using a private offer. And then the more technically convenient way is to do the onboarding using an ARM template, in that case, any account, even you're running pay-as-you-go, you'll be able to start using the Lighthouse capability. And as I mentioned, there are more and more services that are being integrated with Lighthouse. Even some third-party tooling and solutions are being supported nowadays. And this is a diagram that explains what I meant with granular access grants. If you're a partner, this could be how your customer landscape looking like. For customer one who is running on EA, your task is to manage their monitor and policy governance scope under a resource group. So you'll be able to only onboard this part. But for customer two, you have a higher scope to manage. You're doing also patching activity on entire subscription. And this customer is running under CSP agreement. And then you have another customer who actually needs to grant the entire tenant scope to you. And you are also having more responsibility to cover up. Lighthouse has the possibility to support this granularity level. Yes, and the first step is to onboard a customer. There are two main ways to onboard a customer. One is to use an ARM template, and this is, I already mentioned, it's technically easier. It doesn't have any requirement for what license type you as a partner is running. So all you need to do is to, you can download directly the template from the Lighthouse GitHub site, change a couple of parameters, which includes the tenant ID of your tenant, what is your offer name, and what is your offer description. And then very important, you need to specify in the authorization part what are the different roles and the permissions you will need to assign in order to perform the task in your service agreement with the customer. And then you need to hand out this ARM template to the customer side, and that need to be deployed on their environment by a non-guest account. And then also need to have this particular right permission. For example, typically we have an owner for the customer side doing this activity. Here you have the link directly back to the different templates that you can utilize. You don't have to do it from scratch. And then I can also show you there's now a more user-friendly way. If the customer is not very experienced working with ARM templates, you can also make a portal experiences by using the deploy button. I will also show you how this works. And then we have the second way, which is to publish the offer directly using the marketplace. In that way, you are actually creating a managed service offer. And then you can have one offer containing different plans, meaning that you might have a diamond agreement, a gold agreement, a bronze agreement that has various level of responsibility and price, of course. And then another advantage, you can then make your offer either public or private, depending on if it's multiple customer facing or is it tailored for one particular customer. And this table basically has a good guidance showing you which is the preferred onboarding way for your customer. The managed service offer definitely has higher requirements on the partner side. It requires you to have an account on Partner Center. You need to have Silver or Gold Cloud Platform competency level, or you need to be an Azure Expert MSP. And with a public offer, you'll be able to reach new customer base that you were not in contact before. And of course, you can also choose to have a private offer. From the customer side, they need to accept this offer on their portal. And from the limitation perspective, automation is still very limited supported if you use the marketplace offer approach. And there's also wait time. After you have published the offer, it might take some time before this is actually available. And if you look at the ARM template deployment, it doesn't have any requirement on the partner. You can even just test it out by building a simple demo. If you have a MSDN account or pay-as-you-go, you can also use that. ARM templates is one-to-one to a particular customer. but you can definitely save a base template and then use that and customize that according to your different customer needs. And it is also easier to do automation. You can, for example, incorporate that ARM template to existing CI/CD pipeline as part of your automation schema. And yeah, and then after you have deployed, after the customer has deployed the ARM template, you basically just need to wait 5 to 10 minutes, and then you will see the resources being projected in your environment. There's basically no wait time there. And with that said, I will switch directly to a demo. The demo will be two parts. The first part focus on how you can onboard a customer, and then second part, how you are actually using Lighthouse in your operation work. I will just stay in the slides a little bit more before I switch to my demo environment. I want to first demo the marketplace onboarding experiences. Since I do not have a partner center account, so here I will just show you some screenshots. But actually, we have really good documentation, detailed stating each step, what you need to perform. And I put a link here if you're interested to visit there. So once you are in Partner Center, you need to, in the first step, create an offer. And in the category, you need to choose to create a managed service offer. And the next step, you need to provide an identifier for your offer. The offer ID must be unique, and this is publicly available. And you can also give an alias. This alias is for internal use only. And inside an offer, you can have different plans. I use the example diamond, gold, and bronze, but you can call it whatever you want. Maybe they are suited for different customers or covering different scopes. And in the technical configuration, here you need to really make sure you are putting the right tenant ID. This is your own tenant ID belonging to the service provider. And in the authorization part, here you are basically specifying what are the different roles you need to perform your work and which users or groups or service principals in your tenant will need to have that role. In this example, I'm specifying a role. I call it MSP architects. And the principal ID, this is corresponding to the identifier. I'm in this example, I'm onboarding a group. And if you go to your Azure Active Directory for a group or user or service or a service principal, it is this object ID field that you need to copy and paste in that field. You can also choose you want the access type to be active or eligible. This is associated to the privileged identity management feature that I will go deeper into later on. If you click this link here, you will see a full list of the built-in RBAC roles such as contributor, reader, and the more granular roles. Then you can just basically choose. And after you do that, this particular group, in this case, will have that role being assigned to them. All right, and now I'm going to demonstrate to you the second onboarding experience using the ARM template. As you can see now, I'm in the official Azure Lighthouse GitHub site where you can find the different templates corresponding to different onboarding flavors. For example, you can't actually onboard the entire customer subscription. You can only do on the resource group level. Maybe you want to do multiple resource group deployments. And there are also some other flows that are integrated with PIM. Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. For now, I'm just going to explore the most basic one, onboarding the entire subscription of the customer. If I click here, I can get both the template file and the parameter file. This is exactly the same template, but in my Visual Studio Code. The template file, basically you don't need to do anything. I just want to point out that the most important are the two resources being created here. One is of the type registration definition that gives the relationship establishment between you and your customers. And then we have that actual assignments taking place. The parameter file, this is where you need to customize in a number of places. First of all, the base information, what is the name of your offer, what is the description of your offer, and don't really double check this point. You are putting the right tenant ID belonging to you, the service provider. Then we have the authorization part. You might recognize it from the marketplace onboarding experiences. Basically, you need to show which user or group or service principal from your site needs to have this particular RBAC role. And the display name is an arbitrary name you can't put in there. You can decide yourself. And this role definition ID, you need to actually look it up from the Azure official documentation. I'm going to show you where. So basically, if you go into the Azure Building Roles article, there you get to see all the list of all the different building roles, the name, the description, and it is this ID that you need to copy paste into your ARM template. Yeah, so that's pretty much all you need to do to prepare your ARM template. Then the next step, you need to hand it over to your customer and deploy that on the subscription level. We also have the article in the official document showing you how to do that. If you go to Lighthouse, how to guide onboarding customer, there are detailed description, but I just want to quickly scroll down to the actual scripts, deploy the ARM template. And there you can find the PowerShell scripts or CLI, that's the preferred way to let you do that deployment. And now I'm switching to my demo environment. It is called Pizzaland, and you can recognize it by this blue color ribbon on top. And throughout my demo, I will use this as my customer environment. So basically, I'm in the Cloud Shell. I'm doing a deployment. I have already done this step, but just want to show you the script. Yeah, so I'm just doing a subscription deployment in this case. And after that, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, it will be ready. If you want to verify if the deployment is successful or not, you can go to Azure Lighthouse. And since this is the customer side, I would like to see my service provider offers. I click on service provider offers, the second option here. There you can see I have officially been onboarded to the Jing MSP offer subscription, the one that we described using the ARM templates. And if I click on the specific and if I click on this option, I will get to see what is the offer description, what is the offer name, and I can even see what are the different roles that I'm granting to the service provider to control. In this case, I have all these different type of roles granted to this particular ID. This is actually corresponding to my user account. And you can see that this is also a permanent access type, meaning that the service provider, they will always have access to my subscription with these different roles. And I'm not using at the moment any multi-factor authentication and so on. Well, in the last bit of the demonstration for the onboarding process, I'm going to show you the deploy to Azure button. It is a very good option for those customers that are not very comfortable working directly with an ARM template deployment so that you can actually portalize their experiences to make it more user-friendly. I'm not going to show you in detail how to do this. Here you have the tutorial for that. But after you have basically stored the templates in the Git repo, you can create this button. And once the customer click to that, they will be directly linked to the customer custom deployment option on the portal. And since you have already pre-filled the templates for them, all these fields will be filled. So the customer basically just need to do 2 clicks and the template will be deployed. So that is one alternative to using the script to deploy the template itself. With that said, we concluded the onboarding part, and now we move on to the second part, how Lighthouse actually works in the operational side. I'm pretty sure you all are very interested to see how it is changing the user experiences from the service provider part. But for now, I will just stay a couple of more minutes on the customer side to show you some additional features the customer can use. Now I'm back to the Azure Lighthouse portal on the customer tenants. We have already reviewed the service provider offers. I also want to highlight that we have the delegation field. And from here, the customer can see clearly what are the scope of their environment that they have delegated. In this case, you can see that the VS subscription 2, the name of the subscription, has been delegated using the Jing MSP offer subscription. And here you get to see again all the different roles that the service provider are having access to. If for some reason the customer wants to delegate another subscription under the same under the same offer, I can simply come here, click Add, choose Microsoft as my service provider, the offer, and then here I can now also choose to delegate my VS subscription 3 if that is the scope I also want the service provider to manage. And another scenario, if now the customer see, hey, I would like to expand my business, I need another service provider to also help me with maybe my monitoring or my security offer. So if I go back to the service provider offers page, I click add offer, and then I will be linked to the marketplace where I get to browse all the different offers that are publicly published by different service providers. And let's say today I'm interested in seeing which company are offering monitoring service. I check. So I type in monitor, and there, let's just take this as example. This particular partner is offering this management service. If I go into plans, remember we talked about plans on the onboarding side. This service provider is providing 3 different plans called Optimal, Essential, and there's another one. And if after I read it, I think the essential one suits me very well. So I'll just create it from here. And in the next step, I can choose preliminarily to delegate my subscription via subscription tool, and the deployment should be happening in this region. And I can also add a description if that's needed. So moving on to the next step. Yes, so here I can write what is my contact information. It's important because most likely you'll be contacted by the service provider after you created the service. And then we come to a very important part, the access permission. In this part, you get to review what are the different roles the service providers require in order to do that service. And in this particular case, the service provider wants have the administrator access on a particular principal ID and the readers on another one. And these are corresponding to the contributor and reader built-in RBAC roles. And as you can see here, the service provider is actually security aware. For the contributor role, they are using the privileged identity management to make sure that they will only have the just-in-time access and not having it all the time. And now if everything looks good, I will click this box and click create. And then you are done creating an offer using the marketplace. And now one last thing I want to demonstrate from the customer side. If I go to my activity log, so this is the place where you can see all the operations that have been performed on your environment. So you can see in the past hours, a lot of activities have been performed. And there you can see the time, what is the scope, and the most important field we are looking at now is the event initiated by. As you can see, if the event is initiated by this Jing316.onmicrosoft.com, this is being triggered by a native user in this tenant. But there are also some actions like this one. It is actually being triggered by someone from the Microsoft tenant. So these ones are the activities that are performed by the service provider on behalf of me. In this way, I can see there are a couple more here. In this way, from the customer side, they can clearly monitor what activities the service provider are performing on their tenants. so that they have the confidence that all the transactions are transparent and traceable, which is one very important value proposition brought by Lighthouse. All right, so now I'm at the exciting part of the demo. I'm going to show you how Lighthouse is changing the service provider side of the story. I'm again back to my Azure environment, but now I'm in another tenant called Microsoft. You can recognize it by either the @microsoft.com, or more easily, you can see it is represented by this black color ribbon on the top. So first thing, let me still go to Azure Lighthouse to verify that we have the relationship established with the customer. Now I go to the first one, Manage My Customer tab. If I go to Customers, there I can see I have already onboarded one customer called Pizza Land. And if I click here, I can see it is the VS subscription tool that is being onboarded using the Jinx MSP offer. And in the role assignment tab, here you probably recognize it's the same information that you saw earlier on from the customer side, except that now you also get to see what is the type of the principal ID. In this case, for the demo purpose, I'm only assigning these different roles to a single user, which is myself. But later on, when we talk about best practices, I'm gonna show you some other ways to do that. All right, so after you have confirmed the onboarding, first thing I want to show you what has changed is the universal directory and subscription filter. So before you have onboarded your customer using Lighthouse, you will only see your own tenant, which is Microsoft. But now, since you have also onboarded the customer Pizzaland, there if you choose Pizzaland as your global tenant filter, there you can see, now I also have access to the VS subscription too. So this is one fundamental thing that can change the view of many other services we have. So what can you do now? Let's go through a couple of common use cases what the service provider can do. First thing first, let's just, let's say, create a virtual machine on the customer environment. As you notice that I'm always logged in with my Microsoft account. I'm not doing any context switching. I'm not going to any other environment. So yeah, to create a virtual machine, first step, you need to specify which is the location, what's the subscription plus resource group you want the resource to be created. And as you can see, since the Pizzaland customer have been onboarded, I can now choose, other than the Microsoft subscriptions that are in my own tenant, I can see I will be able to create the virtual machine directly under the subscription via subscription too. And there I can choose an existing resource group or create a new one. And yeah, and after you fill in the rest of the fields, you're good to go. And these virtual machines will be created on the customer environment using the delegated resource management feature we talked about in the beginning. And after that, if you want to see what are the resources, if you go to just the inventory of all the resource groups, here again, you can choose. Now I'm only interested to see what are the resource groups and the resources the customer has. You can set the filter here, and there you can see all the resources belonging to the customer, but you are doing all the operations directly from your own tenant, which is Microsoft.com. And now if I show you another feature, let's say now the service provider, we are providing the security monitoring service for them as well. And similarly, if you go to Security Center, yeah, just a small briefing. One feature you have is to see the secure score of that particular subscription. And then from there on, you can get different recommendations what you can do. And similarly, you can also check, for example, how compliant the customers are for a certain number of regulatory compliance standards. Yes, and again, here I can choose what is the scope I want to see. If I click on subscription, this will lead me back to this global directory filter. And as of now, let's say I'm interested to see an aggregate score of all my subscriptions across multiple tenants. I'll be able to do that. In this case, you can see I'm selecting 32 subscriptions, And yeah, and this would give me average score of all of these subscriptions. But let's say I'm only interested to see how my customer is doing, so I can choose. Sorry, I can choose. Yeah, in this case, only Pizza Land and only subscription 2. Yeah, and you see now this score is updated since it reflects the scope that is represented here. One subscription, 13 resources, and I get these 7 different recommendations telling me how I can raise the security posture for this particular customer. So that's another example. And now let me go to another very popular service we have, which is Azure Monitor. And here I can demonstrate a couple of things. First of all, I can show you another feature we mentioned in the introduction, which is to protect your intellectual property as a service provider. Let's say we have the different workbooks. So workbooks, for those who are not familiar, these are just very advanced and dynamic dashboards that can help you to more clearly get insights into the resource health of the customers. Let's say I have in my environment developed a really fantastic workbook. It is this one called Workbook Lighthouse, and this is being stored in my own subscription, Microsoft Azure internal consumption. And if I click this one, basically this workbook gives me an overview of how my what are my different VMs, what is the key matrix, where they are distributed, and the health situation. So what I want to highlight now is, again, we have the subscription filter. You can see that I can definitely choose to see what are my resource situation in my own subscription, but you can again see that the VS subscription 2 is here, since this workbook actually supports across multiple tenants. So if I choose VS subscription 2, there I'll be able to see, yeah, in my customer subscription, these are the VMs they have. They have 2 VMs, and what are the key metrics that these VMs have. And you get all that insight into the customer. However, the workbook is not stored on the customer environment. It is on your own environment, but you can use that to get insights into the resources that belong to the customer. So even though later on the customer ends that offer with you, they are not getting any resources or intellectual property away from you. And the last thing I want to demo is the log analytics. This is basically the place where you can use a query language called KQL to interact with the logs and do the different queries you can. And again, in the KQL queries, you can set the scope. If you choose the scope to be on the customer's environment, since it is onboarded using Lighthouse, there all the queries you are performing will be directed to the customer tenant. Again, a quick reminder, all the activities that I'm performing, I'm doing it with my own Microsoft, my service provider accounts. I don't need to have another set of credentials just to log into the customer's environment in order to perform all these activities. And this is thanks to the power of Lighthouse. So this basically concludes the demo for now. I hope that it really clarifies. In the beginning, remember we say that Lighthouse is now changing the way how you're accessing the resources. Rather than going to the environment, you actually have the resources projected back to you. I hope this is getting more understandable at this stage with the demo. All right, so now let's go back to the slide, and I would like to share with you some additional facts as well as some deeper technical considerations that will be good to be aware of when you are implementing Lighthouse. First couple of points are related to what roles you can delegate. Do note that today we only support the delegation of built-in Azure RBAC roles, and it is not possible to delegate a role that you customize yourselves. And even for the building roles, we have some constraints. The first one is that you can't delegate an owner role, which I believe is done so by design, because it is simply too powerful and is violating the rule of least privilege. With this said, the most privileged role that you can delegate using Lighthouse would then be the contributor of an entire subscription. Then we have another role called User Access Administrator. Typically, this role will allow the user to decide who have access to a certain Azure resource. In the context of Lighthouse, it would be strange if this user can decide who from the remote tenant can have access to a particular resource. That's why we are limiting down the use case to the automation scenarios. So the user who has delegated this user access administrator right will be able to assign building roles to a managed identity on the customer tenant. I'm gonna share more about this in the coming slide, how it works. Regarding the scope of delegation, you can either delegate access to a resource group or a subscription. And today we don't support natively the management group scope delegation. However, there is a workaround for that, as we do have a policy that you can deploy at the management group level. And this policy will basically check and go through all the different subscription underneath that and see which ones have been delegated to a specified management tenant. And this will be a service provider then. And if it is not delegated, we can trigger the automation to achieve that delegation. And lastly, just a reminder, I'm putting again the link to the GitHub site where you can find the templates of all the different deployment models. Right, so here I would like to spend some more words explaining how the user access administrator role works. Sometimes the MSPs, they need to do some automation tasks, which need to leverage on a managed identity on the customer tenant. For example, maybe the MSP, they are managing different Azure policies that need to trigger some remediation tasks, such as enabling a key vault diagnosis. Maybe you need to install anti-malware on the VMs. And these, since they are automation tasks, need to be triggered by a managed identity and not by a human user. And how you achieve that, basically on the onboarding template, principal ID is still the same. It just identifies the user or the group that can assign the roles. And then you need to specify the role definition ID for this built-in role user access administrator. And for this one, we have another additional field called delegated role definitions. And in this example, I'm showing the contributor and the log analytics contributor roles, which means that this user will be able to assign these two roles to a managed identity from the customer tenant in order to trigger the automation. Sometimes you also get asked by partner if it's possible to link their partner ID to track their impact on the delegated resources. And the answer is yes. And I'm here showing the simple steps how you can achieve that. I'm also including directly the link to the entire article if you want to see the details. So in summary, you need to create a service principal and then use that service principal to link to your associated MPN ID. Note that this is applicable if you're onboarding a customer using ARM templates. If you are publishing directly an offer in a marketplace, then the MPI ID is linked automatically for you by default. You don't need to do anything in addition. Yes, and now we can move to the next chapter. You have already had a good understanding of what Lighthouse is. I'm going to show you some best practices, how you can implement it and take it to the next level. First of all, I will share with you some best practices from the user management perspectives. You probably remember still in the demo, I'm assigning all the different roles to a single user in my service provider account. And in production, this is actually not the recommended approach because then every time you need to onboard or offboard a person, you need to inform the customer, update the template, or even update the offer in the marketplace. So the recommended approach is you should always do the assign permissions on the group level, and note that it has to be a security group and not a Microsoft specified group. In this way, you can hide all the complexity of internal staff onboarding and offboarding from the customer. And next, I would like to share with you a hidden tip. In the building role list, we have a role called the Managed Service Registration Assignment DV role. I understand that the name is not a really good one, but actually, without this role, currently the offer, once they're established, they can only be deleted from the customer side. If you are also assigning a user this role in the ARM template or in the marketplace onboarding approach, then you can also remove a delegation from the service provider side. So that is a small advantage if you want to have. Then moving on to the third point, if you want a user to be able to see the My Customer page on the Lighthouse portal, then that person need to have at least the user, that person need to have at least the reader role. So the recommended way is to onboard a group of users who have the reader role and making sure that you have all the relevant people added there. And the next point is particular for those who are used to working using the PowerShell environment. If you only use the Get AZ subscription CMD list, it will always return the tenant ID for the managing tenant by default. And so that if you want to see what is the home tenant and who is the managed by tenant, you can use those specific attributes in order to identify whether a returned subscription belongs to. All right, so next move on to some best practices around security in Azure Lighthouse. We understand this is a topic of high concern for the service providers because just together with the increase of convenience where you now can rule all your customers in one single place, we also have the increased risk that if this account is unfortunately breached, the attacker can also have access to all the different customers and the result can be really disastrous. So the rule of thumb number one is to really make sure you are already using MFA, multi-factor authentication, on your own service provider tenant. And you are aware that you are applying the principles of least privilege, even though it is tempting to give the contributor rights on the entire subscription so that you can do most of the tasks, but that's definitely not the secure way. Instead, you should really analyze your tasks. Are you only doing backup? Then maybe you should limit the rights to the backup related roles, for example. So the first point, this recommendation has been there since the day Lighthouse was released. But just before the summer this year, we are enhancing this approach by releasing something called the AAD, Privileged Identity Management, in combination with Lighthouse. The advantage of this is that you are really adding and enforcing the usage of MFA, and more importantly, the limited time access for the service provider to have that privileged role in order to perform its task. These steps, they need to be defined already on the onboarding process so that the customer also has the confidence and guarantee that you are not risking their security. More details of this will come later on. And the third point is related to what kind of segmentation that you can do when you are creating groups and onboarding customers. Our recommendation is that you can do it either per customer base or you can do it per industry segment base. If you look at some examples, this is a segmentation done by industry. And in this particular example, the service provider, they are publishing the offer directly using the marketplace. And under the offer, we are making two different plans. One plan is adjusted for the finance customers, and the other plan is customized for the public sector customers. And we are creating different groups of users addressing the FSI and the PS customers. And with that, you can have customers that are in different industry branches, choosing the plan that matches their need. And then another example is to do it by customer. And in contrast to the public offer that we show in the previous slide, we are actually doing now private offers, one per customer base. In this example, we have two large customers, Contoso and Fabricam. And maybe you will have a group of users dedicated for each of these particular customer. And know that this is a private offer, so only that particular customer will see the plan that is tailor-made for them. And now we are reaching the final part. We are going to look at some of the latest scenarios that are announced related to Lighthouse integration with some other platform capabilities we have before we close with a final Q&A. All right, so first let's have a recap of what we just talked about in the past hour. We really looked at how Azure Lighthouse can bring more security, governance, as well as business opportunities for our partners, our managed service providers. If you look at a summary of the different advantages, one thing that really stands out is that single authorization token that allow you to manage all your customers without the need to create separate sets of credentials. The customers can have better transparency and control, knowing what activities you are performing on their resources. We try to keep the user experiences clean, native, and unified, meaning that we are not introducing additional layer regarding to how you are managing your customers. If it's Portal, CLI, PowerShell, you get to keep exactly the same way how you are working as before. And in contrast to the all-nothing approach, we have now flexible, granular, and secure way for you to have access to the customer's environments, depending on what's the task that you have agreed upon with the customer. And everything is license type agnostic, meaning doesn't matter the customer is running CSP, EA, pay-as-you-go, Lighthouse works exactly the same way for all of them. And finally, it is rather conveniently to incorporate the ARM templates to the existing CI/CD pipelines you have so that it becomes part of your automation mechanism. So with that said, we are now adding additional steps on this picture. And the three that really stand out is the Azure MFA and Azure AD Privilege Identity Management integration. We have now the cross-tenant multi-workspace management experiences with Azure Sentinel. Sentinel is our very native cloud SIEM system, security information event management. And then finally, we also have the very powerful announcement between Azure Lighthouse and Azure Arc integration. All right, so now let's go a little bit deeper into each of these new features. And first up is Azure AD PIM and Azure Lighthouse integration. We mentioned this briefly when we talk about the security best practices for Azure Lighthouse. And I will say this is really a feature that has been asked by our partners for a long time. And finally, we were announcing the public preview from May this year. Basically, we are building upon the existing feature of Azure AD PIM, allowing that just-in-time access for a privileged role, as well as the enforcement of NFA. Now, rather than always having a permanent delegation of role for partner on the customer's environments, you have that eligible option as well. With that, we mean, first of all, you can enforce MFA, and then you can also specify what is the maximum time the user has once they elevate themselves of this privileged role when they are performing a task. And this flow greatly enhances the security of the customer's environment. If you look at what is really being changed, we are adding this additional section on the onboarding ARM templates called the eligible authorization. So what it includes, first of all, we are specifying what is the maximum just-in-time access policy time duration. Here, as you can see, it says 8 hours, means that the partner, once they elevate themselves, they will have maximum 8 hours to complete the task they need to do. And after the time expires, they will lose this access to this privileged role. And the first part, you can also enforce the usage of multi-factor authentication. And it is also possible to add an optional step. This is approver. If you want someone to approve this request when the role elevation happens, you can specify who will be the approver in this flow. And then here we have the same structure as the permanent assignment, but the person who is having access to this role will be only having it for a maximum amount of time that you specify here. So this is the eligible authorization rather than the permanent authorization that we saw in the previous example. If you look at some additional facts for this flow, we require either EMS E5 or an AAD P2 license to be held by the managing tenant, because that is the requirement in order to use the PIM flow. But note that this is not required on the customer tenant. And when you define the access policy, the maximum time you can specify for any role is 8 hours. I think the minimum is 1 hour. And currently, we also have the constraint that it's not yet possible to assign the eligible role for service principal account. So if you need to do automation, you still need to do the permanent assignment. And then lastly, it is also actually an important point to call out. If you are assigning a user eligible role, please also make sure that the same person or group, they are having a permanent reader role assignment in the normal authorization part, because this is the prerequisite in order for them to see the role elevation in the Azure portal. And to see more information, you can go directly with this link so you can see how the entire flow works. And this is how it will look on the user interface. Rather than saying permanent, you will have the role showing eligible on the access type. And if you hover over that, you will see if you are enforcing multi-factor authentication, what is the maximum activation duration minutes. Due to time constraints, I'm not doing a live demo here, but I can highly recommend this 18 minutes video Azure Friday series produced. There you get to see an entire description as well as a complete demo of this new Azure ADPM and Azure Lighthouse integration. And the second announcement is the integration between Azure Sentinel and Azure Lighthouse. Azure Sentinel is our very own cloud-native theme that has become a more and more a popular choice among the modern security operations standards out there. It is a very important component in the security offering by Microsoft, which covers the entire life cycle of your security operation process, from data collection, from an hybrid environment across hundreds of different sources. And then we also have data analysis, as well as the support for fast automated remediation. And all these elements are empowered using additional AI and machine learning algorithms. And now with the integration Lighthouse, it really increases the market for the managed service providers providing the managed SOC offers, so that they can stay in their own tenant, but still be able to do multi-workspace management across their different customer spaces. And at the same time, utilize the feature to do such as protecting their intellectual property while still gaining insights across the different tenants. And last but not least, we have also announced integration between Azure Arc and Azure Lighthouse, which is creating completely new opportunities for the MSPs on the market. Azure Arc is the very crucial component when we talk about our hybrid offering, as we can safely say that hybrid has become the new normal. Today, we find customers running their infrastructure across many different setups, including natively in Azure. Maybe still some of them are on-prem. They could be running in another hoster's data center, or maybe multi-cloud. And one challenge here is definitely to find a unified way to govern all of these resources in a unified way. So what Azure Arc is trying to solve here is to extend that Azure control plane and the different governance, security, monitoring features that were previously only possible to apply on the native Azure resources to extend to those resources, those servers and Kubernetes clusters that are running in another data and in another infrastructure. How it works is basically by installing an agent, you will assign Azure resource ID to those resources, and they will appear in your Azure inventory as if these are native resources. You'll be able to do policies to assign different role-based access control and leverage the existing management product suites that you have already been doing on those hybrid resources. So how can this be combined together with Lighthouse? I think this is explained really well in this picture. So everything from the first two layers, this was what we talked about today. We say that with Lighthouse, the MSP will be able to manage the Azure resources across multiple tenants. And now with Arc, the customer, they can onboard their on-prem and multi-cloud resources and project those to their tenants. And if the MSP has visibility to that, it means the MSP then can also extend their scope to manage those resources that are not natively living in Azure. So this is basically how the integration works in a nutshell. And now we're coming to the very end. Before we go into the Q&A, I would like to share some resources how you can get started with Azure Lighthouse. We have announced some learning passes on the Microsoft Learn platform that let you maybe more systematically learn what is Lighthouse, what's the value proposition, and some other features that you should be aware of. We have really great Azure Lighthouse documentations. You saw that I have already referred to some of them. I will put the links in the end as well. We do have an Azure Lighthouse community that allow you to ask questions if there's anything that you wonder about. And then we also have a page that goes deeper into how you can integrate Azure Lighthouse and Azure Arc. And we have some partner previews information there as well. And then you can always use this landing page, aka.ms/Azure Lighthouse, to find information you need. And now we're in the final Q&A session. Unfortunately, this is a recorded session, so I can't take any questions live, but I will mention some of the most common questions that I'm getting from my partners when I work with them around Lighthouse. So question number one, what's the pricing of Azure Lighthouse? This is really to check if you listen to me carefully in this session. So basically, Azure Lighthouse is completely free tool. You don't pay anything extra to get all of these awesome probabilities. So there's really no reason to not start trying this out. Then question number two, who is Azure Lighthouse for? Is it only for service partners? The answer is no. Even though I would say the MSPs, the partners that are providing management services for their customers, here we can be talking about bigger MSPs or the small cloud resellers, like some of you. Um, you would definitely benefit from those features that we demonstrated in this session. But actually, Azure Lighthouse can also be used in the enterprise scenario if, let's say, a company, they have many different internal tenants for reasons of acquisition or other reasons. It is basically a way for them to manage different tenants under one single roof. So in that way, they can stick to the ARM template approach, and this will decrease their management overhead. And I would say this should even be considered by the partners who are today only providing application provisioning service in the marketplace. This could be an added value for them to provide some managed maintenance or some other update activities if that is also something they can consider adding in their package. And then the third question is, how can I get started with Lighthouse? How can I get some hands-on experiences? Well, in the previous page, I showed already some resources how you can get started learning more about Azure Lighthouse. And to get the hands-on practice, I really recommend you start building a simple demo yourself. All you need to have is two different tenants. You might already have a tenant that you can use as your test environment, and you can always use pay-as-you-go, or maybe you have an MSDN tenant that allow you to play around with the ARM templates, for example, seeing how the PIM flow works, and try out the different best practices I talked about in this session. So really highly recommend that. And then the last question is also very common. How do I know which services are already integrated with Lighthouse? And to answer this one, I will actually direct you to documentation we have. Let me turn this up. So I'm now in this official article, Cross-Tenant Management Experiences, that you can find in the Azure Lighthouse documentation site. I'm actually dropping the link directly in the next slide as well. In the beginning, it talks a little bit of the basics, what is the right understanding of tenants and delegation. What I want to highlight is this chapter called Enhanced Services and Scenarios. This is the full list of the current integration Lighthouse supports with the other platform features. For example, under Azure Arc, you can see what you can do with Arc and Lighthouse. And then we have also many different platform management tooling, such as automation, Azure Backup, Azure Blueprints, cost management, Key Vaults, Azure Monitor, Migrate, and we have Azure Policy, and so on and so forth. So it's a really long list, and we're trying to keep it up to date. So do keep an eye on it and see if there are any scenarios that you can utilize right away. And here I can't stress enough that maybe Azure Lighthouse by itself is not a very complicated tool, and it doesn't essentially create any value by itself. But when it is being integrated with this other very powerful platform tooling, Azure Lighthouse is really one of the best tools the service providers can utilize, and this can really create tremendous value for them. And yeah, and it is completely for free. So with this said, I can now conclude my presentation. Here, I put some links references. I think these articles, I use them at some point in this presentation. So if you want to see the details, rather than Googling yourself, you can use these links directly. With that said, I would like to give you a big thank you for listening in to this webinar. Hopefully now you have a better understanding of what Azure Lighthouse is all about, and you have some idea how you can start using it. And good luck on this journey.